Planes go up. Planes go down. But what planes don't do is vanish off the face of the earth. Evangelion, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Medica Box. All of these anime were produced by a studio called Gainax. Gainax was once a pillar of the anime industry, one of the biggest giants out there. Producing genre-defining titles like Evangelion, they helped revolutionize the mecha and sci-fi genres. But as the years went by, you started hearing less and less about them. From a group of friends making fan animations, to the invention of a super-hit anime, to scandalous tax evasions, to the fall of a giant. It all started with a group of friends. Hideaki Anno, the introverted animator who loved robots and tokusatsu. Takami Akai, the social and talented illustrator. Hiroyuki Yamaga, the creative and ambitious storyboard artist. Toshio Okada, the passionate otaku with the business brain. Yoshiyuki Sadamoto, the skilled but quiet character designer. They were all obsessed with science fiction and animation. In the late 70s to early 80s, while attending Osaka University of Arts, they became heavily involved in Japan's growing convention scene. One of the biggest of those events was the Nihon SF Taikai, a national sci-fi convention established in 1962. Each year, the convention changes cities and gets a nickname based on its location. Tokon for Tokyo, Daikon for Osaka. The first Daikon was held in 1964, the second 7 years later. But it was the third, held in 1981, that would later be dubbed the birthplace of Gainax. That's where it all began. The 20th Nihon SF Taikai, known as Daikon 3, was held in Osaka in 1981. Traditionally, these conventions opened with a speech or a simple stage skit, but not this time. The group that would later become Gainax, who were part of the organizing committee, had a wild idea. Let's make an animated short film to open the convention. They had no idea this would become a legendary moment in anime history. At the time, they were just a bunch of students from Osaka University of Arts, working under the temporary name to Daikon Film. With almost no money, they raised a budget of about 1 million yen, roughly $10,000, from local sci-fi fans, an incredibly small amount for animation. They borrowed an 8mm film camera and animated everything manually, frame by frame. They slept on the floor, ate instant ramen every day, and ran on passion and caffeine alone. It took around 4 months to complete. So what was the Daikon 3 animation about? It told the story of a young schoolgirl, later known as the Daikon Girl, who receives a mysterious cup of water from 2 cloaked men. She's tasked with delivering the water to a dying daikon, a Japanese radish. Get it? Daikon? On her journey, she fights off iconic villains like Darth Vader, Godzilla, a xenomorph, and many more. It was a wild celebration of pop culture, packed with unlicensed characters and even music, most famously Twilight by Electric Light Orchestra. That made the animation completely illegal to sell commercially, but also made it even more legendary. Despite being fan-made, the animation was so bold, energetic, and referential that it stunned the audience. And it proved something important, that even amateurs, if passionate enough, could make something as exciting as a professional studio. To think that in the summer of 1981, a group of sleep-deprived college students with an 8mm camera and a dream could create something that would change anime history forever. But that was just the beginning. Daikon 4, the sequel that became a legend. After the success of Daikon 3, the team wanted to go even bigger. They began planning the animation for Daikon 4, the 22nd Nihon SF Taikai, scheduled for 1983. This time, they had a clear goal: better animation. A larger team, even more pop culture references, and a more emotional, symbolic finale. They switched to 16mm film, and for the first time used full color, which was much more difficult and expensive to work with. They still had almost no budget, but the team went all in. They worked non-stop for over a year. They even moved into a small house together, turning it into a shared studio and living space. Then, in August 1983, the Daikon Girl returned. Now older and stronger, this time wearing a bunny girl outfit, she flew through space on a surfboard, fighting her way through characters from Star Wars, Gundam, Batman, and more. Once again, the animation used Elo's Twilight without permission, making it just as legally questionable and just as iconic. The short ends with a massive explosion of flowers and symbols, the world engulfed in light, hope, and pop culture. A metaphor for otaku dreams taking over the world. At the convention, the audience was blown away. Despite being amateur work, the animation was fluid, colorful, and stylish, and the bunny girl became an icon of otaku culture. Daikon 4 is now considered the greatest fan-made animation in anime history. It was shared, bootlegged, and passed around for years. And the team behind it, Daikon Film, suddenly had the attention of the entire industry. Encouraged by the response, the group decided to go pro. They formally established Gainax, and that is where the next chapter begins. Royal Space Force, The Wings of Honeomais, was Gainax's first official work after the studio was founded. A feature-length anime film, directed by Hiroyuki Yamaga, who had just turned 24 at the time. It was animated by a young team that included Hideaki Anno, and the whole project was funded by Bandai, who took a huge risk on an unknown studio. But it wasn't as smooth as it sounds. Bandai nearly pulled the plug during production. They didn't understand the story and weren't sure anyone else would either. Set in an alternate world similar to Earth, but with its own culture, technology, and history, the film follows Shirotsug Lahadat, a lazy young man who joins a neglected government program called the Royal Space Force. When the government suddenly decides to launch someone into space, Shirotsug is chosen to become the first astronaut. The film explores politics, war, ambition, and the search for meaning, not space battles. No mecha, no fan service, no familiar tropes. No wonder Bandai was skeptical. It took 3 years to make and cost about $7 million, an enormous budget for anime at the time. The film was critically praised, but a box office disappointment. Audiences expecting action-packed sci-fi spectacle were met with something quieter and more philosophical. Still, over time it gained cult status, and is now seen as a pioneer of anime as serious cinema. Gunbuster came next, a 6-episode OVA that became a major stepping stone for both Gainax and Hideaki Anno. It was Anno's directorial debut, and it showed. Gunbuster combined giant robot action, sports anime tropes, hard sci-fi, and intense emotional drama. The story follows Noriko Takaya, a young girl who wants to become a mecha pilot like her father. She joins a training program alongside the elite, and through pain, perseverance, and loss, becomes humanity's last hope. Gunbuster was Gainax's first real commercial success. It balanced goofy fan service and comedy in the early episodes, with deep tragedy and sacrifice by the end. Episode 6 is famously in black and white and delivers one of the most emotional endings in anime history. Even this early, Anno was showing his skill, combining sci-fi spectacle with raw emotional weight, a style he would take to its breaking point in Evangelion. Then came Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, a 39-episode TV anime that aired on NHK, Japan's national broadcaster. It was directed by Hideaki Anno and based loosely on a concept originally pitched by Hayao Miyazaki in the 1970s. It follows a young inventor, Jian, who meets a mysterious girl named Nadia, who's being hunted for her pendant. They're swept into a globe-spanning adventure with sea monsters, airships, and the legendary submarine Nautilus, commanded by Captain Nemo. Nadia was a huge hit in Japan. It introduced Gainax to a mainstream audience and proved they could do family-friendly adventure, not just edgy sci-fi. But behind the scenes, the production was a nightmare. Budget problems and endless deadlines from NHK. Anno became mentally and emotionally exhausted, a burnout that would carry into his next project. Episodes 23 to 34, now known as The Island Arc, were outsourced and are infamous for their low animation quality and filler content. By the early 1990s, Gainax was in serious trouble. Their planned sequel to Royal Space Force, a film called Aoki Uru, was cancelled. The studio was broke, and its staff was demoralized. At the same time, Hideaki Anno was in a deep depression. Burned out from Nadia, he felt directionless, even suicidal. So he decided to pour everything he had into a new project, a mecha anime, but one that would deconstruct the genre and reflect his own psychological struggles. That anime was Neon Genesis Evangelion. In 1993, Anno pitched the idea to TV Tokyo. It was greenlit. Later, he would say, "I was a wreck. I didn't care if I lived or died. Evangelion was my way of dealing with that." Evangelion premiered in October 1995. It followed 14-year-old Shinji Ikari, recruited by the mysterious organization NERV to pilot a giant biomechanical robot and fight off monstrous beings known as angels. At first glance, it looked like a standard mecha anime, but as the series went on, it peeled back layer after layer, revealing depression, trauma, religious imagery, and philosophical despair. It was bold, experimental, and deeply personal. Production breakdown. But the production was chaotic. Gainax had a limited late-night slot, not the usual afternoon anime time. They had no full script when they began. Episodes were written, animated, and aired almost in real time. Many episodes were completed days or hours before broadcast. As money ran out, they cut corners. Still frames reused animation, long voiceovers over black screens. This wasn't aesthetic choice. It was survival. By episodes 21 to 24, the show had become almost abstract. And then came the final 2 episodes, 25 and 26. They abandoned the external plot entirely and plunged deep into the characters' minds, with sketches, text on screen, and philosophical monologues. Why? They ran out of money. They ran out of time, and Anno refused to deliver a conventional ending. Fans were furious. Some sent death threats. Gainax's office was even vandalized, with graffiti demanding a real ending. The end of Evangelion, 1997. Gainax responded with a movie, Death and Rebirth, followed by the end of Evangelion. It was visually stunning, violent, and disturbing meta, and philosophical, a brutal retelling and alternate ending to the final episodes. Anno once said, "Evangelion is like a puzzle. Everyone can interpret it in their own way." Whether it was genius or madness, Evangelion became a cultural phenomenon. But behind the success, trouble was brewing. The tax evasion scandal. Gainax made millions. Model kits, soundtracks, t-shirts, DVDs, and licensing deals. But in the late 90s, Japanese tax authorities began investigating them. In 2001, Gainax was officially charged with tax evasion. It turned out they had underreported around $5 million in income, mostly from Evangelion merchandise. Gainax was still a small, otaku-run studio with no real financial expertise. Afraid of being crushed by taxes, they tried to hide revenues through side companies and creative accounting. But it backfired. They got caught, and their reputation took a massive hit. A senior executive, Yasuhiro Takeda, took responsibility and fines were paid, but the damage was done. Evangelion saved Gainax and almost destroyed it. The show made them rich, but their mishandling of that wealth exposed how unprepared they really were. They weren't a company. They were still just anime nerds clinging to the edge of greatness and falling. By the early 2000s, Gainax was running on fumes. Most of its early creative geniuses had already left or were on their way out, and the studio was still reeling from the Evangelion tax scandal. Then, in 2006, Hideaki Anno finally left Gainax. He'd had enough of the mismanagement, of the internal politics, of watching his creation be mishandled. So he founded his own studio, Studio Khara. And with it he had one goal: to rebuild Evangelion, literally and figuratively. The rebuild of Evangelion, starting in 2007, Anno and Khara launched a 4-part film series, Evangelion 1.0, You Are Not Alone. Evangelion 2.0, You Can Not Advance. Evangelion 3.0, You Can Not Redo. And finally, in 2021, 3.0 plus 1.0, Thrice Upon a Time. But there was one big problem. Gainax still technically owned Evangelion. The legal fight for Evangelion. At first, Anno didn't try to sue them. Instead, he struck a licensing deal, allowing Khara to make Rebuild while splitting the revenue with Gainax. But Gainax, again, mismanaged the money. In 2014, Gainax borrowed 100 million yen, around $900,000 from Khara. They failed to pay it back. They also withheld royalty payments from the Rebuild films. So in 2016, Studio Khara sued Gainax and won. As Gainax floundered, Khara slowly reclaimed the rights to Evangelion. And by 2020, Studio Khara had full ownership of the franchise. But Anno wasn't the only one who had enough. In 2007, after directing Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Hiroyuki Imaishi, the man behind Gainax's most explosive style, also left the company. In 2011, he co-founded Studio Trigger with Masahiko Otsuka and other ex-Gainax staff. Their mission? To carry the punk rock spirit of old Gainax into a new era. Trigger went on to create Kill la Kill 2013, Little Witch Academia 2013 to 2017, Promare 2019, Cyberpunk Edgerunners 2022. While Gainax was dying, Trigger and Khara were thriving, carrying the creative legacy forward. By the end of the 2010s, Gainax was no longer Gainax. The heart had left, the soul had split in two, and formed new bodies. One was Studio Khara, driven by Anno's introspection. The other was Studio Trigger, fueled by Imaishi's chaos. All that remained behind was a hollow shell. Even after all the drama, the lawsuits, the split with Anno, the financial scandals, Gainax still existed. Barely. It was a studio in name only, surviving on scraps from Gurren Lagann and old Evangelion royalties. The real creators had all left, but the worst was yet to come. February 2019, a voice actress in her teens, a minor, accused Gainax's president, Tomohiro Maki, of sexual abuse. According to reports, Maki coerced her into undressing and posing nude under the pretense of voice acting training. He told her this was necessary to help her career. The abuse happened multiple times between February 6th and 23rd. She had been living in housing provided by Gainax, where Maki acted as her manager and guardian. On December 5th, 2019, Maki was arrested by Tokyo police. He was charged with semi-forced indecent assault, a Japanese legal term meaning the victim was coerced or unable to resist. After his arrest, he stepped down as president. Yasuhiro Kamimura, a former associate of Groundworks, was appointed to clean up what was left of the company. In December 2020, the Tokyo District Court found Maki guilty. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. The anime community was horrified. Former Gainax legends, from Studio Khara to Studio Trigger, publicly condemned the company. Studio Khara released a statement saying, "The current company has no relation to the people who created Neon Genesis Evangelion. We strongly condemn this incident." Several regional branches, like Fukushima Gainax, cut ties immediately. Whatever remained of Gainax's name was now completely toxic. No creators would work with them. No studios would collaborate. The studio was finished, morally and professionally. 2024. Official bankruptcy. In May 2024, a debt collection agency filed a lawsuit against Gainax. They were forced to file for bankruptcy. On June 7, 2024, Gainax officially shut down, ending a 40-year legacy. They were 300 million yen in debt. The Gainax name, along with its remaining trademarks, was transferred to Studio Khara. It started with a group of friends making fan films in a cluttered bedroom in Osaka, dreaming of space, of heroes, of animation that meant something. But 40 years later, that dream was gone. What remained wasn't a studio. It was a warning that even legends can fall.